Good evening, everyone. In the interest of everyone's time, we're going to move on, even though Commissioner Atkins had to take a call. He's out in the hallway, but we do have a quorum. So I'm going to ask the commission if the agenda, which you have in front of you, meets your approval. And here comes Mr. Atkins. Everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Very well. Mr. Atkins, would you mind, I will call us to order, would you mind leading us in a prayer, please?
I don't mind at all, okay? If you all bow, just, pray amongst yourself silently as I attempt to pray orally. Most gracious, we thank you again for another lovely day. We thank you for another opportunity to serve and work in our community. And we thank you for those who are there on the fields today, protecting us and attempting to do what is right by this country and this government, protect all of our leaders and protect this commission. And then we pray that what we do tonight will be pleasing in thy sight. These and all those blessings I ask in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Commissioner Sears, would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. We are, since we've already approved the agenda tonight, we're in the next section called Hear the Public, wherein the public is invited to speak on any particular subject that is on our agenda for the evening. There will be an opportunity later in the meeting, in the second section of Hear the Public, where you're invited to speak on any topic that is not on the agenda. That said, is there anyone that would like to take the podium? Seeing none, we'll move right on into item 1, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Commission, do I hear a motion?
I move for approval of the minutes of the October 9th, 2017 meeting as presented.
Second.
Would Commissioner Cardle entertain a friendly amendment, please?
No.
Would Commissioner Cardle entertain an unfriendly amendment, please?
Yes, sir. What do
Well, just in the last page, this is for the people who 25 years from now are reading this under the part where Ms. Hamner was reciting the history of Calvin Fackler, wherein it says, she said she hated to disagree with Mr. Hunn because she was afraid of him. Maybe we ought to just change that to the word but. Take that, she was afraid of him. Just
We made up.
let the record reflect that Mr. Hunn and Ms. Hamner have made up.
Maybe she just has a healthy respect for him.
Is that acceptable, Commissioner?
Absolutely.
There you go, okay.
That was a great catch.
Is there any further comment? Seeing none, Chair will call the question. All in favor of the amended motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 2, that's fun to start out a meeting like that. Item 2 is the banner request. Ms. Norma Gale Lewis.
My banner and I are back again.
There you go.
For the 59th year, the Ephraim McDowell Auxiliary will be having their annual luncheon and quilt raffle on the 3rd of November. It will be at Lexington Avenue Baptist Church. Meals are very good. Country ham sandwiches, but if you don't like ham, you can have pimento cheese or chicken salad. And vegetable soup, and it's $8, and we will deliver, and that's all aside from the banner. I guess it should have been on the agenda, but we we humbly ask your permission to put our banner out here on the wrought iron in front of City Hall again, and hope to be able to do this for many more years.
Is it the same banner as last year?
It is the same banner as last year. We
Therefore,
just
it
changed the date.
It met last year's requirements?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I hear a motion, Commission?
I move to accept the request from the Ephraim McDowell Auxiliary to display a banner at City Hall.
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. How about a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Terry.
Just a question, just for the record, when do you want to put it up? And
It is here, and as soon as we want it through the 3rd of November, so that's 2 weeks from last Friday. So anytime they can get it up, it is here in Donna's office.
Gotcha.
And Ms. Lewis, you left out the most important part, which is the variety of desserts that are offered.
That is right. We do have a very good variety of desserts, and we will have a homemade bake sale as well.
Excellent.
And we will deliver, so all you have to do is call us. We're aim to please.
So we have a motion and a second. Anything further?
That's November 3rd?
Third.
3rd
11,
to 1.
11, okay. My calendar.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you. See you there. Item 3 is a proclamation towards the Kentucky Professional, or it's the Kentucky Professional Women's Week. I'm going to ask our own Commissioner Terry if she will do the honors.
I'm reading
What
this
did I
one.
give you?
You gave me the
Did I give you?
domestic violence.
I'm sorry, I did.
Did you mean to give me this?
I'm reversed.
Okay.
Let me do this one. Why don't you do both of them?
Thanks. Thanks.
My truck needs washing.
Yeah. Just hop on, I'll carry us all. This is a proclamation of 2017 Kentucky Professional Women's Week. Whereas working women constitute 71 million, or almost half, of the nation's workforce and strive to serve their communities, their states, and their nation in professional, civic, and cultural capacities. And whereas women-owned businesses account for 30% of all U.S. business, generating $1.9 trillion in sales and employing 9.2 million people. And whereas working women should be applauded for their contributions to the workplace and the financial stability of their families, especially during the economic downturn when more women have become their family's breadwinner. And whereas the major goal of business and professional women is to promote equity for all women and to help create better conditions for working women through the study and advocacy of social, educational, and economic issues impacting women in the workplace. And whereas since 1928, National Business Women's Week has honored the contributions of working women and employers who support working women and their families. Now therefore be it resolved that Mayor Mike Parris and the City Commissioners of the City of Danville on this 23rd day of October 2017 do hereby recognize the week of October 14th through 20th, 2017 Kentucky Professional Women's Week.
Do I hear a motion to accept?
I move to accept the proclamation into the record.
Is there a second to Commissioner Cottle's motion?
Second.
Commissioner Sears, thank you. Any discussion? All in
Aye.
favor of the motion, say aye.
Oh,
Ms. Becker is here to receive this. Yes?
Oh, you are? I did not know that.
You didn't see her, did you?
No. We'll have a vote right quick. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Ms. Becker.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to overlook you. How dare me?
Back there.
I know, I saw that. What's it called being when you photobomb from the front?
Vanity.
Since I'm a working woman, I'll just do them both.
Okay, you may want to, the brights are here.
Yes.
Okay? You want to go in there down?
You want to meet me at the podium, ladies? You want to introduce them? You want me to?
We have with us tonight in purple, Jamie Thomas Bright, and we're glad to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to read this before I present it to you. Domestic Violence Awareness Month 2017. Whereas domestic violence in America is intolerable, unacceptable, and must be stopped and deserves considerable public attention. And whereas children who witness domestic violence often grow up believing that physical cruelty in the relationships is acceptable behavior, and thus they tend to perpetuate a cycle of violence in society. And whereas many federal, state, and local programs addressing the domestic violence problem have achieved success, bringing greater safety to families. And whereas community leaders, police, judges, advocates, healthcare workers, and concerned Americans are working together across America to develop solutions to this serious problem and to implement services that will improve our responses when it occurs. And whereas programs designed to educate men and women about ways they can help prevent domestic violence are being developed across our nation. And whereas numerous law enforcement officials and departments have created specialized domestic violence units that cooperate with community advocates to enhance services for victims, and representatives from the faith community frequently provide essential support in areas where there may be no other services available. And whereas anyone can be a victim of domestic violence regardless of age, sex, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or religion. And whereas we must continue to hold domestic abusers accountable, punish them to the full extent of the law, and prevent them from inflicting more abuse. Now, therefore, may it be resolved that Mayor G. Michael Paris and the City Commissioners of the City of Danville, on this 23rd day of October 2017, recognize October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and urge all citizens to participate in events supporting the effort.
Could you read that again, please? I move to accept this proclamation in recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
We have a motion by Commissioner Atkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sears. Discussion? Ms. Bright,
Yes, sir.
I recognize that this hits home, very close home with you, and our thoughts are with you.
This is Jamie Thomas Bright, who lost her daughter to domestic violence. What year?
June 24th, 2012.
June 24th, 2012, and her mother, who is better known as Nana, is here with her to accept this. Thank you, my dear.
Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. I think it should be noted that Commissioner Terry wants to vote real quickly. You want to vote yes?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I won't take but just a second. I would just like to thank the commission for thinking of domestic violence, and it touches me when I see everyone in purple. It touches my heart. Purple is the color of domestic violence. I wear purple nails when people comment on it. My purple nails, you can't see, but I have purple toes as well. It gives me a chance to discuss openly about domestic violence. My daughter, Danielle, was born here in Danville, but she left, went to the University of Central Florida, obtained her degree in hospitality management, got her MBA from the University of Florida, worked at Disney World as a senior revenue analyst for 7 years. She met Jason Bond, who was a Columbia University graduate, University of Florida Law School graduate. When I heard that they were dating, I thought, that's awesome. An attorney on Wall Street. But like the proclamation says, every socioeconomic can affect. What I'm hoping to do is to bring domestic violence out where you can talk about it. I didn't know Danielle was being abused. I thought she could tell me everything, but she couldn't tell me this. And I hope as I can talk about domestic violence, that other people who are suffering will think, I can tell someone, and if anyone is suffering from domestic violence, tell someone. As long as you're breathing, you can get out. And once again, I'd like to thank the commission. This touches my heart, and it touches my mother's heart too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For those of us who remember her, she was such a sweet young lady. So we respect you and cherish you the fact that you are taking a lead on keeping it alive and working towards eradicating this disease. So thank you.
Thank you,
just
Mr.
thinking,
Atkins.
Anytime I've seen Mrs. Bright or speak, she always has such grace and courage that I don't know if I could have. And I just really respect you for that and respect what you're doing and that you're trying to solve the problem instead of just being bitter, as I think maybe I would be.
Well, I know this is a city government, but my faith is what gets me through each day. And I won't quote the verse, but, oh, maybe I will. What can you do? Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Wow.
And I feel Danielle is my guardian angel, and I feel she's here with us in spirit.
And Miss Jamie always has a smile on her face.
And no apology necessary.
Well, I
Absolutely
wasn't
not.
sure what I could do or not. Stephen Dexter, please don't come get me, but if you want to, that's fine with me.
Sometimes it's easier to seek forgiveness than it is permission.
Yeah, we don't have the big hook anymore. You can just,
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you all
Thank you,
very
Jamie.
much.
Item 5, you have in front of you my recommendation to the airport board as a replacement to the passing of Stuart Powell. That replacement, the airport board is asked to be Patty Powell. And she's agreed, if we want her to serve the remainder of Stuart's term, which is till August 31 of next year.
I would move that we approve that excellent recommendation to have Patty Powell serve out the remainder of her father's term. on the
I move that
airport.
we accept the recommendation to appoint Patty Powell to serve out the remainder of her father's term.
We got a motion and a second. And we got two motions. Who wants it?
You can have it. He's older.
Motion by Commissioner Atkins at the request of Commissioner Cardle. Who seconded the motion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
This is a tough one for us as well, though. I just want everybody to realize that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, there is no replacement. We're just trying to fill something in here.
Absolutely not. I was glad that she accepted that, though.
Item 6 is the tree planting update from Dr. Bo Weston.
Johnny Appleseed, how's it going?
Hello, I bring you happy news once again. So this is the 4th year of planting and the 5th year of fundraising of our tree planting in Danville. Last year we planted another set, so we planted 150 trees over the last 3 years. And this year, in honor of the 225th anniversary of statehood, we're going to plant 25 tulip poplars around the city, especially probably in Millennium Park, but in other places around, as well as, funds willing, another 25 of different species. So we will be on track for that 50 a year. We have at this moment raised more than half of the $5,000 that we try to raise each year, and then go ask Kentucky Utilities for a matching fund. And so the action item is to ask your permission to make that application on behalf of the city for this matching grant.
I'll move to allow for the grant to be processed.
Thanks, Commissioner Atkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Commissioner Terry. Discussion?
Once again, good work there, Dr. Weston. We appreciate that.
This is an everybody-in effort. I particularly want to thank Janet Hamner, who is here, who does the actual work of finding the spots where we put the trees.
Any further discussion? Chair will call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks
you,
again.
sir.
Thank you.
Bo, this is another tough one as well. That you continue to do this. Really tough.
Item 7 is the code enforcement report. Ms. Lester.
Good evening. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce our new employee, Ian Young. He is our new codes enforcement officer. He's been on the job about a week, and he still keeps coming back. So we're excited about that.
Don't jinx it.
So we just wanted to let you see him and let him get a taste of what city commission meetings are like.
It's the most exciting part of
Did you
your
get
job.
your taste?
Yeah.
It's the most exciting part, right?
Well, it's been a fun one so far.
Thanks, Ian.
Glad to
Glad to have you here.
We had 27 grass and weeds complaints this month, and grass and weed season's fixing to end here in the end of October. We issued 63 parking tickets for a total of $1,655. And Commissioner Series, we issued 22 business licenses for a total of $550. We also have issued a handful of code citations thus far, and in this month we collected our first $100 under our new ordinance. So we mowed property and for a total of $920 and placed 13 liens. And I'll entertain any questions you might have.
I've always been curious, and I don't know if you had the numbers, but I'd be curious to know, since we've started this more, I call it aggressive enforcement maybe, or consistent enforcement, how the citations have run. Are they increasing significantly, do you think, or?
Not significantly, but it is another tool for us to use. That's not our first recourse. You know, we try to get them into compliance, but there have been situations to where we have utilized the citation. So stay tuned. We'll know more as we go along as to how much impact it's having.
Do you think we're investigating more? I mean, even if they don't come to the citation level, just handling more complaints, able to get to more complaints, that kind of thing?
I don't know if we're any more, but having Ian definitely will help with that as well. It gives us more eyes and ears and hands on the ground. But like I said, we'll know a little bit more as we go along as to how it's impacting us. But it is a tool that's very helpful.
Thank you.
Bridget, you want to bring us up to speed on item 13 with regards to Sutton's?
We are in the process of looking at that and getting quotes, and hopefully here in the next few weeks we should have something to come back to you with for a recommendation.
Haven't met with the owner yet?
I'm sorry.
Have met with the owner or have not?
The owner was supposed to come down and did not, so we're going back the other route to getting quotes and looking at it from that perspective.
I got a call from Brent Springate. You may know that name. There's a tree somewhere off of 2nd Street near Duncan Hill that apparently he has requested we look at many times, and I don't think that's occurred.
I'm not sure, Mayor. I'll have to check into that with Tom.
I'll get you his number later.
Yes.
Thank you.
As a matter of education, Bridget, at for myself, if nobody else. Number 6, property posted not maintained. Property owner wants to surrender property to the city. How does that work? And certainly maybe Attorney Dexter can help us. We would just take it over and...
Are you talking about what will happen after the building is demolished?
Yeah, I guess typically we go after them and put a lien on the property, but in this
Right.
case, it looks different to me, so, educate me a little bit. It's just like, we're giving you this, so it's all yours, huh? Number 6.
Yeah, it's like they're wiping their hands of it, saying it's on you.
Well, that kind of segued into the question I was going to ask is, can we have more of that so that maybe we can get these properties into the right hands and rehab them instead of just tearing them down?
We can't. We could accept a gift of property under certain circumstances, but before you accept a gift, you have to make sure there aren't liens attached to it, and you couldn't accept something that was encumbered with a mortgage, for instance, that then becomes the city's problems. So we typically don't accept property that's blighted, but we could. My preferred method of doing that would be through a foreclosure process if the city was the only lien holder there, and then the person could divest the property to the city to satisfy that lien amount. However, the person's going to have to know what equity they have in the problem and have full recognition of what in fact they're doing. I'd be hesitant to allow that to occur if the city has several $100s in liens and there's an unencumbered piece of property. Even if it's dilapidated, the lot itself may be worth anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 depending on its location. So it's not as easy as just giving, quote unquote, giving the property to the city. We're typically not in the business of doing that, and then we would of course have to either tear it down, clean it up, market it, and there are it could be environmental hazards that would have to be taken into account. There would be a lot of due diligence as the city would have to perform prior to accepting a gift such as a blighted piece of property.
So I guess in the case of number 6, you're just exploring that. They've thrown their hands up and want to surrender it, but maybe we don't want it. Is that correct?
Well, the preferred approach is to foreclose the lien and have the master commissioner sell it and let someone else buy it who has talent and time and resources to do that.
Any other questions of Ms. Lester? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good report. Thank you.
Good.
Item 8 is Resolution 2017-10-23-01, Design Guidelines. This is in reference to the Architectural Heritage Board new guidelines. Counselor, anything you want to add?
Based on our meeting, I think 2 meetings ago when these were first revealed to you, there were some questions from the commissioners about the language that was employed. And if the language refers to things that are appropriate or are not appropriate in the district. And I had not read it with that angle in mind, and so you asked me to do so. The document itself is well over 100 pages, and I spent a good amount of several hours to study it thoroughly for you as per your request. And in comparing it to the previous document and the current design guidelines, I found it to be much more tolerable and permissive than the prior document. The prior document had lines like section 1.1.1, thou shalt not use X, Y, and Z. 1.1.2, thou shalt not use X, or this is not appropriate in Y district. More regimented, like really rules and prescriptions for the district. This document was a more, I think, holistic approach to historic district and what is acceptable with a general, with considering the whole guidelines front to back. you wasn't so focused on one particular item as maybe the prior design guidelines were, but a more holistic approach to saying, let's look at these in total. So in that way, I thought it was actually very well done. And I know considerable amount of time and effort had been spent on it, was approved by the Architectural Heritage Board, and Planning and Zoning received it without comment, I believe, and approved it for your consideration. And in looking at it, the one comment I received that I think some residents of the historic district were concerned with was the language of not appropriate. And the one recommendation I received was something that said to this effect: facade alterations will be carefully considered, weighing the effect of the proposed alteration against the overall historic ambiance and historical value of the architectural elements of a specific building. That one statement there is, to me, the value I took away from reading the entire document.
Wow. Yeah.
The word appropriate is a term of art in historic guidelines. So certificates of appropriateness are issued. So certain things are by nature appropriate or not appropriate based on that legal term used. It's not necessarily the same way as we read, we tell a child something is not appropriate. It's the certificate you're given at the end of a process that does consider what the ambiance of a particular street or section is, and what materials may or may not be considered appropriate due to where in fact they are in the district. So with that in mind, I don't have any recommendations of change or revision to you. Certainly there may be some individuals who would like it to be more permissive than it is, but I would say it is much more permissive than what was and is. And certainly I think someone who comes to the board for approval of a certificate of appropriateness for a building has a much better chance of having somebody consider the totality of their project, which I think was the concern of some of the individuals who spoke to you and you alluded to last time. I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but those are my general impressions after spending considerable time with the document.
Let me get a motion in a second so that we can discuss this.
I'll move to approve resolution 2017-1023-01 design guidelines.
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion and a second. We are in discussion.
I'll start off. I agree with Stephen that this is a really well done document, well thought out, and it gives more leeway than any prior document we've had. I still would like to add the sentence, not appropriate but can be considered, just because I think if somebody's just reading the guidelines, I still think when you see not appropriate, you think no. And I also know that, I know what Tom and Julie and Mary and those people are thinking as far as that allowing for leeway, but what happens when the next group comes in and this is all they have to go by? Are they going to think the same thing? And that's my hesitation, I guess.
That's a good point.
One thing that's a struggle with these documents, like one of the things says that you shouldn't paint over brick that is not previously painted. So one of the items says it is not appropriate to paint over unpainted brick. So the challenge is if you say it's not appropriate to paint over unpainted brick, but may be considered, then it becomes the question, well, what's the standard?
Well,
So that's the challenge in reading it and crafting language that is different from what is there from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to craft something more lenient without completely eroding whatever the standard was for a historic district.
Well,
That's the academic challenge to me.
Yeah, I understand, and I guess I don't see it as more lenient. I just see it as letting people know that there is, bringing their idea forward is worth their time, that it could be something that would meet with approval.
Sure.
So I don't
I
really.
think there are certain quotes in the document that could, when read in isolation, anything can be misconstrued. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. If we focus on one particular passage of anything, we can take it out of context. But when read as a whole, I think there are other quotes in there that are reassuring to owners in the downtown district or any historic district that say that the guidelines will be considered in their totality, and that any suggestion when viewed in the light of all the guidelines will be considered. To me, that seems to achieve what you are desiring without eroding some set of standards altogether.
Yeah,
Doesn't it also say case by case, considered case by
It does.
case?
Throughout the document, and that's a positive change. It says each request will be determined on a case-by-case basis. And I think the goal of that was to try to encourage people to feel that they were on equal ground when coming in to make some request of the Architectural Heritage Board.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's a really well done, and I don't want anybody on the Architectural Heritage Board to think I don't approve of the work they did, because that's not true.
So you think that what was requested by some of the citizens to add the words "may be considered appropriate" just changes the document too much?
You're free to make that requested revision to them. I'm just questioning if you make that statement throughout the document, is there any point in actually having a standard? I mean, it's a theoretical question, but if you say something is not appropriate but may be considered, does that mean you can paint over the brick, unpainted brick? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a historic. I don't pretend to understand all the ins and outs of what makes a historic district historic.
Council, isn't the reality that if the individual making the application doesn't agree with it, it comes before the commission?
It does, and that's something that we changed several years ago. So this body becomes the decider of last resort, which I know you covet. And before, it was overly burdensome, in my opinion, to require an individual property owner to go to circuit court to have a final determination of the appropriateness of a design change in a historic district. So now that was been revised to allow the commission to make that decision. So there is a remedy there, and that remedy is outlined well, I would say, in the new guideline process.
Does that help?
Yeah, I understand what Stephen said helps. But I was thinking, you said if you add that one sentence, "Well, I have the standard," then the same could be said for if you're going to have wiggle room at all, "Well, I have the standard," I guess. But those are all kind of getting down in the weeds a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't do that. But I say we call a question and vote.
I'll say this. For instance, it says in one standard says that vinyl siding is not appropriate in the district. But again, it reiterates that on a case-by-case basis, things should be considered. On my law firm last year completed the building of a new law office, in addition to our law office, that is predominantly brick. But we made a request that the dormers that are on the third level of our building be allowed to have vinyl siding with wood grain in it. And we justify the request saying it's minimal, it's less maintenance, things of that nature. And it was considered fairly, and it was approved. So I understand there's a thing that says vinyl siding is not appropriate, but it shall be considered on a case-by-case basis. And maybe for a whole building, it's not appropriate, but there may be uses where it is appropriate.
Right. And I also think, reading these, most people who buy a building downtown, they get it. This is probably not even gonna come into play, but we want to make sure we have the guidelines for those times that it does.
Are you calling a question?
Let's call the question.
He's calling.
If I may,
Oh,
Mayor
one
Paris,
more.
before you call the question, can we, the resolution that we're going after on the agenda doesn't seem to match the one that I'm looking at.
That's what I was going to ask.
yeah.
Can we-
Which number do we need to use?
It says 09. but that
It
was
says
Oh,
1009 or
that's right.
1023.
Yeah, 1023.
Sorry, that was
That's what
prepared
you
for the
read.
last meeting, but we pushed it for further review into this meeting. So it should actually be Resolution 2017-10-2301.
Okay, that's what you read, right?
Yeah.
Do I hear a question called? Then the chair will call the question.
Yes.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Scott, do you have a city manager report, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I want to begin this discussion, which may be a little bit longer than what I typically give, but just reflecting upon the efforts the city has made over the past couple of years to be more active in economic development pursuits. Many of you were, maybe all of you were at the recent Danville expansion. Was it just last week, I guess, that we were out there, where they have a multi-million-dollar expansion there. The City Commission has approved a number of tax incentives for business expansions. We are, stepping up our funding for economic development pursuits through the EDP expanded budget and matching grant this year. In our budget, and our city staff are looking at other ways in which we might further sharpen the pencil in terms of making more effective decisions in promoting economic development efforts and outcomes. We're looking at currently all our financial policies and reviewing our tax incentives, and at some point in the future, we'll have a report for the City Commission to consider if we find things that might need to be changed or modernized or updated. As part of that general review, I would say it's come to the staff's attention, and I and others have attended one or more workshops, and I think, Mayor, you were at one of those also. Maybe, I think you were present in Elizabethtown, where we talked about cities becoming more actively involved in tax increment financing and creating those TIF districts, tax increment financing districts. That's fairly recent legislation. My memo I sent to you earlier today talked about in 2000, Kentucky updated that legislation to permit cities and counties to create TIF districts. And that was done primarily for the benefit of Louisville and some of the major projects there, the Churchill Downs expansion, the Yum Center, and some of the other big projects. State law was revised again in 2007 to make it easier, really, for all cities and counties throughout the state to enter into forming tax increment financing districts, and to also enable it to sort of dovetail with state incentives that might be available for a local project. Projects that have been very successful are those that I've mentioned earlier in Louisville, as well as I'm sure many of you have visited the riverfront, in Covington and Newport, and Lexington has been sort of involved for now a multi-year period to create a new complex downtown utilizing a TIF district. So the whole area is expanding in consideration statewide and by cities particularly, and smaller cities such as Danville or Madisonville or others. And I bring this to you tonight in the form of just bringing the matter of creation of a tax incremental financing district to public awareness and to yours. And so I would say, or the citizen might say, what is a TIF district? It's simply a boundary that is established either by city or county or jointly that will utilize the increased revenues that might be generated by businesses locating in that district to pay for the developmental cost of new facilities, whatever complexes or capital outlays may be developed in that district. It's used as a form of revitalization in distressed areas of cities. It is not a tax increase on any business located in such a district. It doesn't change the manner in which taxes are levied or collected. It simply utilizes a portion of the taxes so collected, the growth in those taxes, to help fund a project that will presumably have overall economic benefit to the area and to the community. So I'm bringing this to your attention because I've had several conversations with folks about the potential for utilizing TIF districts to aid development in communities. I've had one meeting with a predominant attorney who is, I think, the leading attorney in Kentucky, who has assisted the Northern Kentucky communities, as well as Lexington and other cities statewide, in creating a TIF district. And I'm proposing tonight that the City Commission basically approve a proposal I received from that Cincinnati law firm to provide that service to Danville in terms of examining the potential benefits of defining a project and attempting to create a district and to attract private investors who would so locate. Now, while arguably I would have and do have, I think under law, the ability to contract for those professional services myself as city manager, as the cost is below $20,000 in our purchasing procedures, I wanted to bring it to your attention and to that of the community, because I think it's an area that we haven't really fully examined in the past to see if we cannot benefit our community by having a fairly rigorous examination of the potential that might exist for creating that TIF district and making that available for private investment. So there's a proposal before you tonight. It's from the law firm of KMK, Keating, Muthing, and Kleekamp of 1 East 4th Street, Suite 1400, Cincinnati, Ohio. The principal in that firm, who has specialized in TIF law for quite a number of years, Mr. Jim Parsons, is the former city attorney of the city of Newport, and he actually, for a period of time, also served as their city manager. But since leaving those offices quite a number of years ago, has developed quite a specialty in TIF law, and as I mentioned, has provided services to many, and is currently providing those to many cities in Kentucky. The proposal again is to utilize him to examine the creation of a TIF district, to create all the documents necessary should it be deemed that it is, should you deem at a future point in time, basically to proceed with an ordinance to create such a district, and to cover his professional service fees and out-of-pocket expenses, with the professional service fees, again, not to exceed $20,000. And so I would recommend that you do affirm that if in fact it's your interest to pursue this idea.
You want that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I think that'd be excellent.
Do I hear such a motion?
I just want to ask a question for consider a motion. I know this is economic development for new businesses coming into the area, but my question is that if someone that already exists downtown and wants to expand or in whatever, they would be eligible for this if this was in place?
Well, any development in an area defined as a TIF district, and that is to be determined, could benefit from that district. Any private investor, even if they have another business, if they invest or expand in this location, would have the potential for benefiting, yes.
Okay. Well, 'cause that's the question we're going to be asked by current owners inside the district, is that they'd be eligible for the benefits as well.
But it's a matter of law with regard to the qualifications of defining the boundaries of the district. So I'm not qualify to say what those boundaries might be.
Sure, I understand that. Yeah.
But Mr. Parsons would be in terms of his recommendations to you, which would be a future decision on your part to determine the boundary and in fact to proceed if you desire to do so.
So the boundaries, he could determine, it could be a block, it could be a street, could be an area. Is
Sure.
there, right, I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, usually it would encompass, as I understand it, a blighted area that is
Right.
intended to be improved. So, our beautiful areas probably would not qualify for that, but again, it's a determination yet to be made.
I think the Louisville waterfront, riverfront area where the new stadium was it TIF
That
district?
was.
Yes.
I believe that was.
On the, just for the record, when you mentioned the taxes that are, I guess, are they deferred or used to fund the project itself?
As I understand it, again, this would not affect, it would not increase any taxes.
Right.
Nor change any taxes currently in place. It would not change the manner in which they're collected. But if in a district you have no business operating and one that locates, the new revenue generated by that business, that growth in taxes would be used to fund the developmental cost. It'd be pledged by the city, basically to the developer to meet whatever the terms and conditions are of that development.
And that's not just property tax? That's
No, it's
No, it's
occupational
payroll
tax.
occupational
property.
tax?
Right.
It's the whole,
Right.
okay.
Basically, you pledge any new tax monies or a portion of the new tax money. So if somebody, if it was in a TIF district and they just expanded their property, then it would just be, only thing, money you could use would be the new tax money, which would be payroll taxes or property taxes that come in for the new money only. So if you had a piece of property that did not have a business on there and a business was built there, then you could pledge 100% of the payroll taxes. If you had a business that already had payroll taxes and then wanted to expand, you would only pledge the new money coming in to pay the debt.
Mr. Scott, I'm going to applaud you for bringing this to us, because we do have to seek every way possible to incent economic development in every way possible. You show me a community anywhere, any community in the nation that has a nice area, nice waterfront, I guarantee you, they have used TIF financing to do that kind of thing. And we probably, now in hindsight, we probably should have already done this some years ago.
Well, perhaps, but I think just the knowledge of this, and again, the law has been just amended fairly recently, and it's probably come to people's attention following the Great Recession, more so than before that time.
If we had this back when the hub closed, we could have used that back then, because look what you got now.
But again, this is it's a public expression of the city saying we want to do something
Right.
within a certain boundary. We're willing to pledge new revenues to help make that development a viable development. The selection of the developers in that proposed project would be a public process. So it's going to be one that is in the public eye moving forward if the project were to come to fruition.
And you think this Jim Parsons is the best expert in your opinion?
Yes, by far, because of the breadth of his experience and the complexity and the simplicity of large and small projects. He met once previously with staff, and so, yes.
I'd like to request the mayor and city commissioners and you, city manager, ask Mr. Hunter if he might weigh in. He might have some experience on that. Would that be appropriate?
I don't object to it.
Yeah. Are you familiar with where you worked before?
Is this a slow, high pitch or what?
I don't know, felt like it just hit me in the head. Yeah, there was a TIF project in Bowling Green, Warren County. It was a signature TIF though. It had more of a public component to it, to build a ballpark, parking structure, performing arts center as the centerpiece, and then build out. But the Planning Commission's role was fairly limited, but did play an interesting role before the TIF. I think our city manager's outlined this excellent. We tried in my former jurisdiction to do what's called a Chapter 99 rehabilitation project the old way. And we basically went from the square to the river in an old warehouse district that was fairly dilapidated, a lot of blight, crime, drug activity, and defined an area and said this Chapter 99 area is to be redeveloped. Well, the way that was supposed to work was the city could go in there and declare it slum and blight. The city could acquire those properties and then flip those to developers to redevelop, but there was no incentive for the developers to fund the new projects. That's why the TIF became an advantage. So for years we sat on that Chapter 99 plan, and the Planning Commission actually did future land use planning and laid out uses in this whole Chapter 99 with the goal that if there ever was a project, we'd be ready to move forward. But no developers really took the bait to move forward, and the city, rightfully so, and used the gentleman that you've heard described here to form a signature TIF with a goal to put, I think, $115 to $150 million in investment downtown, and went down the road. And the advantage being, when we just laid the boundary of the TIF, not only was there the ability for the city or other entities to acquire properties to get them to developers, but then there was a finance now mechanism in place with those escrowed revenues, including sales tax, by the way, which is a huge advantage to escrow sales tax that would normally go to the state. The new sales tax revenues then stays home and pays off the bonds for all these projects. It was very complicated though, and took a lot of smart attorneys to figure all this stuff out. And I believe there's even litigation occurring to this day still on some of this project, but I think it was successful and met the target. Laying out the boundary was the most interesting part for the Planning Commission, because again, there was a lot of determination where the boundary should be. And the city of Bowling Green actually did an initial boundary from WKU to just south of the square, north of the square, but then decided to amend the boundary and went back to Frankfurt and asked it to go all the way to the river. So basically went from the riverfront all the way to the hill up there at WKU, and was several blocks that were then designated this signature TIF area. The Planning Commission's role was simply just to, as development came into the office or folks are interested in development, to defer them to this new master developer or this new authority that was created that was basically in charge of all the development. And it just took off on its own, and still actually went from more of a signature TIF to what I'll call a medical, because right now the main focus now is actually medical office buildings. There's a joint project with WKU, University of Kentucky, and the hospital there on creating two buildings actually. So it turned into a lot of different stuff. But I think the city manager outlined it well, and Mr. Parsons, he is the leading authority in the state on guiding cities on how you walk through these processes. And
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
And Mr. Dexter, page 2 of the KMK proposal, paragraph 3, is that just standard language? Not the other right.
It is. That's
Conflict
typical.
of interest?
It's typical in an engagement agreement that you would say if conflicts arise, our ethics rules would require that to be disclosed to you, and we could either write and consent after we have specific knowledge of the conflict, or in the representation at that time.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Well, I'd be willing to make a motion.
Thank you,
If
Commissioner
it's,
Connell. Go ahead.
I move that we approve allowing the city manager to engage Keating, Muthing, and Klepkamp, PLL, for the purposes of TIF consultation or education. Should it be an up to $20,000 amount, or?
I would say just as proposed by their engagement proposal, which is in fact not to exceed $20,000
Right.
plus out-of-pocket fees.
Yeah, that gets covered in there.
Okay, very good.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Terry. Any further discussion?
Sure, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Thank you. Number one, so we feel like this is only something that the city should undertake, and we shouldn't ask for partnership out of the county or the Economic Development Board?
The county, I think, is the only legal entity that would be allowed under law to enter into the definition of a boundary. I don't think EDP has status to do that. And I wouldn't rule out the county's participation. I just not have had an opportunity to have that discussion with the county judge executive yet.
Right. Which
I
kind
would
of
hope they would join.
kind of leads to the second question. This came up in your report rather than an agenda item, so is there some rush to get this going, or?
Well, yes, I think the date of that letter, you'll note, is October 10th. Today's the 23rd. I've been busy. It's been languished, but I didn't get it on the agenda. And so I'm bringing it to your attention tonight. There's not an immediate urgency if you don't view economic development as an immediate need. But if you view it as an immediate need, why wait, as we're simply engaging for professional services to begin a study?
And as far as TIF districts are concerned, it would be premature, I would think, to ask for partners on this engagement agreement. Typically, after a TIF district is formed, then other governmental bodies are asked to participate and pledge their revenues as well once a project is identified. This is like in the preliminary stage, like the Daniel Boone stage of exploration. I mean, there's no settlement to look at to see who wants to be protected by the fort, so to speak. We just are trying to see maybe what opportunities are out there, if any. And the city is routinely asked by developers, and we've sat in numerous meetings where developers who are getting creative ask if the city is willing to participate in a TIF district. And quite frankly, we have not had the time or expertise to even evaluate what that question means to the city of Danville, but would hope to be achieved through the council, Mr. Parsons.
In order to be in a TIF, to participate in the TIF district, you have to be a taxing entity to be able to be in the district. So the only three that would be in, well, there'd be four. You would have the city, the county, whatever school district's in, you could ask them to participate if there was one, and you could ask the library to participate. So you have to be a taxing entity in order to participate.
I thought his question was sort of getting at whether or not the city and county could have a district outline that covers both city and county land.
All city land is in the
Well,
county.
yeah, the city is in the county.
No. If we do it, it will be just inside of the city limits.
Right.
Or a portion, sub-portion of the city, depending. You know,
Right.
Bowling Green wasn't city
But I was thinking,
limits.
Commissioner.
I think you're right. I think,
Yeah.
you know, we want to hire this group to identify and maybe get our input on what we might feel is something we want to go after. But then if it involves the county, we're sort of in the 9/11 thing here, where they wanted to go forward, but we haven't had a discussion yet, and it kind of bothers me a little bit that we haven't done that. So.
Well, I'm gonna take a little bit of a different thought on that, in that I think we have to get comfortable ourselves, knowledgeable ourselves, in order to say, is this even applicable to where we would want or need, or in everyone's best interest, combine efforts. I'm sure they would have to go through their due diligence process as well. But I really think it begins with us, my personal opinion. I appreciate you bringing it up, because I think we're behind the times on this, and I think there are other incentives out there that we're going to have to bring to the table.
Well, there's a lot of legal work, legwork, activity that has to occur in this initial exploration. Now, ultimately, if we have what we think is a viable project and a viable district, and it may need some more incentives, particularly to make it fly, you know, maybe we will want to encourage the county to give up some of their tax revenue or other taxing districts. But again, I think it starts with us in terms of trying to determine, is it something we want to do? And if so, can we do it ourselves, or can it be broadened to be more successful with other participants?
I think it's kind of ancient history, but when Darrell Belinus was here as city manager, I think that was about the time that the law was changed to make that possible, and he did investigate it to a degree and couldn't come up with a good project. So I'm anxious to see what the consultant comes up with, because, you know, we didn't really know what we were doing at the time, how far, what all it could include. So I think I'm anxious to see what we can do with it.
Since that was ancient history, and since you were here during that time, oh, never mind.
Could I make just a comment with regard to the motion? It's fine. As I said, the city manager, I believe, has the authority to engage this professional services contract, but the former city attorney of Newport and has requested the mayor's signature on the contract, because that might mean more if it's disputed than the city manager's signature. So he's asking for, typically all contracts are approved through the mayor's signature. Personal service might be an exception to that, but that's the way the contract is formed.
I still
I'll make
want
that-
to go back to this one question. Can the city and the county have a joint TIF district?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
But this is just to see if one is even
I
viable.
understand that, but his question wasn't really directed about monies. It was about whether or not we could go beyond the city limits with land, an area.
But it doesn't have to be outside the city
I
limits to be
understand
in the
that,
county.
but it can or it could. You're not saying it should or that it will, but it's a possibility.
Which goes to the point I would like to make is, I think I've been asking the question for about 3 years, why can't we do a TIF? I think Ron's tired of me asking that question. But I've had some interaction with other cities and officials a few weeks ago at a KLC conference, and every time I come away from a conference like that, I look around and I come back to my fellow commissioners and I say, I see smaller cities doing more with less. Why can't we do that? And I agree with the mayor, we are behind. And that's a huge feeling that I came away with from this last conference, is we're behind. So maybe we can finally get a TIF.
If I can go
Sounds
back
good.
to Mr. Atkins, we can partner with the county only if it's in the city limits. We cannot pledge money that we're not receiving for a TIF district. So in order for us to be involved in a TIF district with anybody, it has to be in the city limits. We do not receive revenues from outside of the city limits.
Any further comments or questions? I'm gonna call the question in. All in favor of Mr. Cottle's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are in the section that I promised we would be, called Hear the Public. This is on any topic that is not on the agenda. So whoever wants to take the floor and the microphone, first come, first serve. And your name, please.
I'm Joni Morgan. I live in the city, and I wanted to come tonight to speak on on behalf of the Family Services. If you don't know what the Family Services is, it served Danville and Boyle County for the last 101 years, and it helps low-income people. But doing my due diligence on the board, I was looking over their budget and their expenditures for the last quarter, and I noticed a huge spike in us helping people pay for their city water bills. And I asked the question, why are we paying so much in water bills? And the answer was because of leaks. So if you have a leak in your water line and it goes on for 8 weeks, that bill gets huge. I know this personally because we had a water leak once and our bill was over $600. And for a working family, for a single parent family, for people that struggle with their own budgets, bills like this really put their budget in a tailspin. We offer budgeting classes, but it's really hard to come up with that kind of money in a monthly budget. So I wanted to bring to your attention that maybe it's time for the city to go to monthly water bills. Not only will it help these people and all people, every family in our community, to budget their money, but it will also save our own resources if we're having 4 weeks more of water leaking. That's a huge waste of our resource as a community. So I hope that you can consider this. I did talk to Ron Scott about this, and there may be some plans in the work down the road, but I just hope that we can get to it sooner rather than later, because it certainly does affect every single family that receives city services. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your point. Anyone else? Take your time.
I'm here. My name is Margaret Calhoun, which you know should know me by now. I'm here on the behalf of naming Fackler Street after Michael M. Smith, naming it Michael M. Smith Way. And you said you needed a letter on the behalf of what Michael Smith is about to the city. And Mr. Trimble wrote a letter. Donna has it. I wasn't here last Monday, so I want to know what's going on.
We missed you.
Yeah, I missed you. The second Monday. I forgot. But it'll be purged for the public to be, named Fackler Street after Mr. Michael M. Smith White, And these people are far from out of the state agreeing to it. And that's why Mr. Trimble wrote the letter. I don't know what's on the letter. Miss Peaks got the letter. And it's just a short street of Fackler Street, and everybody's for it.
We spent considerable time at the last meeting discussing the guidelines that the commission had adopted some time ago. I'm going to ask that staff get with Ms. Calhoun and give her all of those processes that allows us to be fair and equitable about this whole process.
I spoke to Ms. Calhoun, and she was aware of the process, and it's
Okay.
out. I told her that it was we were accepting recommendations opposed or for the renaming of the street, and that it would come before you all on the meeting November 13th, that we were accepting those recommendations through the 9th.
Okay.
We accepted those for 30 days? or-
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So we put it out there for 30 days, so
Okay, 'cause
we're
see,
just kind of
I
waiting
know
for
that
it.
Mr. Turnbull, y'all want him, write a letter of why
Right.
we want to
Right.
have it changed his name, and I wish it could be done very much. Make me happy. And then I'm gonna work on Mr. Stewart Powell. That was my buddy. Which I ain't gotta work on it. Y'all gonna do it anyway.
City Clerk Pete, would you share with her about the feedback that you've received thus far, especially from on the city webpage? Because she keeps saying that everybody out there is in support of this, but we're getting some feedback that's contrary to that. Would you share that with her?
I mean, currently, we're accepting, like I said, nominations or recommendations, and we've had some positive and some negative. The city Facebook page, we put it out that we're accepting those recommendations, and we have had some family members, Fackler family members, that have asked that we not rename it. So we'll compile a list or a recommendation of all of what we receive and have it to the commission for the 13th of November.
We're just kind of waiting for the administrative process to,
What family
To go
members
through.
don't want to rename it?
So Mr.
Mr.
Fackler's
Fackler.
family members are still in the community and have voiced some opposition.
Right.
And I wanted her to share that with you tonight so you could take that to your committee, because they need to use the city's website to voice their support rather than Facebook. See, somebody needs to get on Facebook and copy all that and bring it to City Hall, but also encourage them to use the city's website to show their support. And I know there's lots of it out there, but you got to go through the process, and that is to use the city's website to respond. Then they also can call the mayor's number, 238-1200, and ask for the mayor, and give the mayor all their input for or against.
Let me look up your number here, Commissioner Atkins.
Calling 24 hours a day.
But see, I don't understand, Fackle Street went from, started from 2nd, when you turn on 2nd, go all the way to Russell Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Roy Arnold got it.
Yes, ma'am.
From Enterprise all the way back to Warner Street, and we just got a short street from 2nd to the 3rd before we
Well,
cross over 4th.
And we're not supposed to debate this with you, but I'm gonna do all I can to help you, because it
Yes.
seems like, in looking at that, Fackler Street, that is now Rural Arnold Boulevard,
Yes.
was changed before the city commission had a policy about a procedure. So it was probably very easier to get street names changed. It was very arbitrary in some ways, but it was rather easy to get it done. Now there's a process that I'm trying to encourage you all to lead us through. Okay? So Mr. Trumbo, want to add something to it? Oh,
My name is Bobby Trumbo, and I'm an old citizen of Danville, Kentucky. Been here all my life, and it's almost 70 years that I've been here. And so I was the one that wrote the letter in support of Ms. Calhoun's wishes, and to inform you all a little bit more on this area. This was one of Danville's black areas, even though it was considered Fackler Street. And I've done some research on Fackler, the Calvin Fackler family, and all like this. I'm a historian, and so I know all these different things that it pertains to. I could see if there were some Facklers that lived on Fackler Street. I could see if they changed one thing, part of Fackler Street, and left the other part that was black, in a sense. And so people are complaining about this. I would be, if I were a Fackler myself, I would be complaining about Fackler Street going from 2nd Street to Russell Street. If I were a family member, if the family members have not concerned themselves with that whole area, why would they want two different streets that does not pertain to them? I mean, and you can't answer this. I know you can't answer it, and I'm not begging you all to answer this, but what I'm saying is that you have to look at a situation Only one address is changing on Faculty Street. One address is changing. And the part that is going to be, that we would like named this, is the part that where most blacks or African Americans lived in the first place. And so the part that, the total part of Faculty Street was on from 4th Street all the way to Russell Street. And you all know this. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. You all know this. And so this is just something that Ms. Calhoun has come up with, and she's asked me and others to help her out with it. And we're just bringing it to you all for consideration. If it does not pass, we're not going to have no ride in Danville, Kentucky. I'm going to tell you, we're not going to ride, but we're going to be awfully upset. And we would be, and you would be too, if someone that was as valuable to a community, very valuable, and I'm going to say this, and I know it's on record because somebody's recording it, it's okay, but Michael Smith buried both black and white people.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, he buried them. It's a lot of white people, for some of you that may not know, that are buried in Hilldale Cemetery. And so he put them there. And a lot of times, he helped the families out financially himself. So I don't think what we're asking is asking too much. And I understand the Fackler family maybe disagreeing with it. I understand that because that's their legacy. That's their legacy, but they should have been fussing with the other part of Fackler Street being changed too. I mean, you know, that little bit of land, maybe it is historical to them because of Calvin Fackler. I think that's who it was named after in the first place. Maybe they are, you know, they don't want that done. But couldn't we put a plaque someplace dealing with Calvin Fackler being such a great person in our community? And he was. He wrote 1 or 2 histories of Danville and Boyle County, and he was very important. And I don't think that we should throw him over the boat or throw him out to the garbage. But I think that, you know, we can designate something else in favor of him and honor him, because he does need to be honored. And I don't want us to take anything away, but I want you all to remember this. Michael Smith does too.
Thank you both. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. We are in commissioner comments. I defer to ladies first if she chooses.
I can't think of anything.
Mr. Atkins?
Well, I want to do something I should have done 2 weeks ago. City Attorney Stephen Dexter was, in my opinion, I'll just say called out, for lack of a better word, at our last meeting. And Stephen, I failed to apologize to you in public for what happened. So I want to take the opportunity tonight to apologize to you for what happened, because I learned a lot from young people, I always have, and I continue to learn from you. And this is my 7th year on the commission, and I've watched and been a part of your growth as our city attorney. And I want to commend you for the work that you put in for us and for the adult manner in which you conduct, or you try to conduct your business. So my apologies for being called out 2 weeks ago.
I appreciate your sentiment very much. Unnecessary, but I appreciate it.
It's all right.
Well, I was going to congratulate the Danville Admirals on their 10-0 undefeated season, and also the Boyle County Rebels, 9-1. Their only defeat being to the Danville Admirals.
That was very timely.
But, you know, we may have Titletown again here this year. So
possible.
I appreciate the efforts of the young people and the coaches who work with those young people.
Yes.
And might I add, I do have one thing to add. Might I add that both marching bands are having stellar seasons.
Good. Excellent.
Good. Good.
Yeah, I don't have as much to say as normally, but we did get through an Arbor Day celebration. That was a lot of fun, and did a little tour to Ville. And so I think all we have to look forward now is Thanksgiving and some ice at Wisiger Plaza.
I would like for the commission's input on having our annual commission retreat, if you will, where we just kind of say, well, what's our future hold? I'd like to do that in the first part of December. And I advocate that because it's a little bit of a personal thing. Once I get into January, you know, my head's squarely on into that year, and I'm already implementing what I've thought about back in November and December. So I'd like for you to give some consideration. Call me, call Mr. Scott, weigh in, whatever you want to do. Secondly, I cannot attend the next Bluegrass ad, and I can't find the date of it either. Do either one of you all remember? It's 25th of
This Wednesday.
I was wondering if anybody can go in my absence.
Donna already asked me, and I can't go.
Okay.
I tried to get JH to
That's what
go.
was in Lexington, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
So I'll look at my calendar, Mike. I'd be glad to go if it's open.
Thank you.
We've all said no except for him. So.
And lastly, there's a curriculum, there's a book called Bridges Out of Poverty. And I believe, Kevin, you have gone through that curriculum?
I did not. It was postponed.
Yeah.
So I'm
Postponed.
I've gone through it.
You've gone through it,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah, Rick's gone.
It's very good.
You want to elaborate on it?
Well, I think that Amy has attended well, and she's a good teacher, and certainly it talks about people in poverty, and she doesn't dwell so much about, or the program doesn't dwell so much about how people got there, but that there's a great resource there that those folks are survivors, and sometimes they get ignored. And I think that if people embrace the fact that they're in that situation but are not stupid or just whatever, you have a better chance of getting them out of that situation. That's all I'm going to summarize on that. I thought it was very, very good. Shed a new light on poverty and how we might be able to help people get out of that situation.
And I would like to see us as a commission go through maybe a half a day or day of that curriculum, and I'll tell you here's why. As we keep our focus on economic development, we got to make sure we've got the staff, the workforce, to man the jobs, because at some point, workforce becomes gas to the car. No gas, no go. And if we don't do something to help begin to address the issue of workforce and how we expand our workforce. And I tell you what jumped off the page at me in reading the book is that if you have children in your schools that are at free or reduced lunch, that's a barometer for the poverty level in our community. What's the percent in the Danville schools? Do you know?
Well, the last time I worked, they were all Title I schools, so it means they have 50% or above free reduced lunch.
What's it at Boyle? Any idea? But go back to what you just said and let that sink in a minute. 50%. That's a big number in a community that probably doesn't like to think about that. But I think we're going to have to begin to think about that. I think we're going to have to start addressing that. And I'm not saying it is a function of government to do that. I'm saying it's a function of leadership that we start with ourselves and then spread some kind of curriculum.
I think it's a function of us to be aware of it.
Yeah, I think that's the major thing is the awareness that you get out of that program and the book that you read. And again, not to assume that people are stupid and lazy. They're not. They're just kind of stuck in this situation they need a hand out. And some of the things that I think we do as a community and we need to continue to do and be reminded to do is parks and recreation, opportunities in the arts. But, you know, people get stuck and they don't know where to go. And so they don't learn anything new.
I think everybody's signed up.
Aren't we down for December 7th?
I think everybody signed up officially except the mayor.
I'm on the
which
15th. I
you
can
just
go on.
attended.
December 7th it is.
15th?
Did you get that number?
He's doing the 15th?
7th.
7th,
They're going, I can't go then. I'm
I
going
thought
on
you
the
said the
15th.
15th of December.
12:30 to 4:30. Is
Okay.
that here?
The December meeting, to
night.
my last knowledge, was not determined in terms of the location.
But the time frame was in the evening time, right?
I think it was afternoon. I think it was noon to like
12:30,
4:30 or
4:30 is
something.
what I had.
4:30, okay.
But
12:30
location
to
to be
4:30.
determined.
12:30 to 4:30. Well, I didn't stand
I
it.
might change subject a little bit if you don't mind, and just
Please.
one, if you don't mind, Mr. Coffey, could you just go over where we're going with our energy improvement? That might help a little bit with Miss Morgan's concerns in terms of leaking water. Yeah.
Well, one of the biggest pieces of that is doing the AMR system, which is your automatic meter reading. We're trying to do the fixed base system in Danville, which would make our ability to read the meters, collect the data, and then generate a bill a lot more efficiently. And we would hope then, once that's established and functional, to go to a monthly read at some point there as quickly as we can. And then two, we hope that the exception report process where we are alarmed of unusual demands is red flagged on a more frequent basis. And there's scenarios where that could be as early as day to day. So that if the leak seems to be a 24-hour continuous run on a property or something, that we can get a computerized red flag. And then we would sift through things like that on a daily basis. So we have a lot of opportunity, and we want to exploit the technology that we're putting in to the extent that we can to reduce those expenses. And that is one of the reasons why we've been advocating for that to push forward.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that. You know, it was a big chunk for us to take on that, but certainly there's that large concern that you're involved with the family services, of people getting hit with these pretty high bills that I frankly felt like we were sort of forced into by the Fed government. So for us to try to relieve that in some fashion is the best we can do.
While we have our calendars out, did we want to attempt to schedule a day for the retreat, or did you want to get someone to mediate that again?
We could talk about this, and we may have a facilitator yet to be determined, but in light of the fact of our agreement to have a December meeting for the Bridges Out of Poverty workshop, and was that December 7th, as I recall, and as we get into Christmas holidays and our first regular meeting after the 7th, I'm thinking that we might try to have a retreat sometime either the November 29th, November 30th, or December 1st. That'd be Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, to get ahead of the Bridges workshop and our regular commission agenda development work.
I would prefer the Wednesday or the Thursday, being the 29th or 30th. Any preferences? Don't everybody answer at once here.
29th is okay. I can't on the 30th. I can't the 29th all day.
Is that Wednesday? I can do Wednesday.
You can?
That's okay with me.
That's the Wednesday after the turkey,
Rick,
right?
pressure's on.
Guess I should have brought my appointment calendar in.
Let's-
I'll have to get back to you.
We'll put that in. Then what hours we're gonna make it? morning or
I-
afternoon?
I'm not sure, but the last time we had pretty much all day of it, starting at 8:30 or 9 through mid-afternoon. And if we have a typical day, it'll be pretty much that, I would think.
Okay. We'll just block it all out.
So like a 9 to 4?
Something like that.
Okay.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Miss Calhoun, before you leave, okay, well, I just want to say something to you, because we're really not supposed to do this, but at the last meeting, I voiced my support for this Michael W. Smith Way street. I'm not settled in on it being that part of Fackler Street, but I am strongly in favor of a street being named after Michael Smith, and I wanted you to hear that because I realized you were not here 2 weeks ago, okay?
Anything else? Seeing none, we'll move right along. Item 10 is payment of the bills, which you have in front of you. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve payment of the bills in the amount of $217,616.85.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any questions, comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 11 is the second reading of ordinance number 1906. This is a codification of city ordinances. Donna, you want to elaborate on it? You certainly want to read it.
It's the second reading of ordinance 1906, an ordinance enacting and adopting a supplement to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Danville, Kentucky.
Do we hear a motion?
Yes, I move to accept that ordinance, second reading ordinance number 1906.
Thank you, Commissioner Sears. How about a second?
Second.
Thanks, Commissioner Cottle. Discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Atkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Terry?
Yes.
Mayor Paris?
Yes.
Commissioner Cottle?
Yes.
Commissioner Series?
Yes.
Item 12 is resolution number 2017-10-23-02. This is a grant application approval. Again, Ms. Peak?
We would ask that you approve the resolution before you. We would like to apply for the Kentucky League of Cities liability grant. They offer a liability grant and a workers' comp grant once a year. And it's a 50-50 split. It's $3,000 based on our premium for the year, what we pay as a city. And we would like to put a project before you, a sidewalk project. So, and Earl can elaborate on that.
So their portion's 3,000 or
Yes.
total? Okay.
And then ours is 3, so it would be
Okay.
6,000.
Is there a motion?
I move for approval of resolution 2017-10-2302.
Thanks, Commissioner Cardle. How about a second?
Second.
And Commissioner Terry. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chair call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Do we have anything in the way of utilities? How about public safety? Chief? Chief? You want to talk a little bit about the tabletop from last week?
If I could.
Why don't you? Sure. Yeah, we want people to see you.
Always good to come up here. Last week, myself, the mayor, and many other leaders in the community got together and played tabletop. A tabletop is an exercise around a table where you discuss what you're going to do when things happen bad, unfortunately in our situation. We simulated a tornado touchdown in Bluegrass Estates, and through 5 hours of discussion and steps, we mitigated fairly successfully our responses. We did identify some strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to be doing a follow-up, I believe, next week on ways that we can improve our abilities to address these situations when they occur. Next year, we hope to actually do a actual event, but the tabletop was our first exercise.
I'd say there were about 50 people there, wouldn't you?
At least 50, yes.
And I think the thing I got out of it, and I think the public needs to know, is that, and it was the moderator who brought it out, that there's already so much cooperation in the community amongst the various first responders that he was impressed by that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I did fail to mention this. We were evaluated and graded, and a report card will be presented in the future. So, yeah, we get to see if we can get all A's or
Bless you.
B's. So we'll
Bless
see.
you.
Bless you. Yes.
Any questions for the chief?
No, but I'd like to make an additional comment. I want to compliment you, Chief Lug, and you and the Boyle County Fire Chief, for you guys were in front of a organization talking about you doing your job.
Oh, yes.
And working together. You made me proud, made Danville proud.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have need for an executive session?
Mayor, before we do that, under the legal section, I wanted to present to you, and Donna actually just laid a copy of it on your desk. There is an offer before you from Danville schools to sell a small tract of land on North First Street that goes from North First Street just outside of the gates of Bellevue to the Danville High School parking lot. It's kind of a long, narrow lot, and they're offering to sell that to the city for possible cemetery expansion or whatever uses the city may have for it, for the sum of $22,500. And so long as the transaction occur on or before November the 15th, and it is subject to approval by the Kentucky Department of Education, and all the standard terms that the seller, being the Danville Schools, would prepare the general warranty deed, provide you free and marketable title, also pay for that preparation and deed transfer tax, and the city, of course, would be encumbered upon to have the deed recording fee as well as the title examination if so desired. So that is before you for action if you so choose to act upon it.
And at that level, does that meet an appraisal amount?
The appraisal was very close to that amount. As I recall, and Earl could correct me if my memory is mistaken, but I believe the appraisal that we had fairly recently for that was in the amount of $20,000. The cemetery, as we will recall, is essentially full with very few opportunities for expansion. This would present the city with an expansion opportunity in that cemetery area, and it would be recommended, from my point of view, that we accept that offer to sell.
Is there a motion to that effect?
What's the size? What would be the total acreage?
The lot is it's
70,
350 feet deep. The width is about 70 feet wide.
Which, if it were on the free market, it'd bring every bit of this on the open market.
Yes, it would.
Well, I'll make the motion that we accept this.
I'll second.
I think anytime you have an opportunity to purchase adjacent land to a cemetery that's already nearing capacity, we have an obligation here, in my opinion. And it's a fair price.
Someone second? You second?
He did.
Mm-hmm.
Any further comments? Chair will call the question. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. All right.
And Mayor, in answer
Yes.
to your earlier question, yes, a executive session is recommended for the purposes of discussing personnel matters.
Okay. Commissioner Cardle, would you like to make a motion?
For personnel? I'd love to.
No, hold on. Commissioner Atkins, you make a motion for us here, sir.
Yes, sir. What's your question?
Make a motion for
Oh, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to talk about something.
We're waiting on you for personnel.
It's been 7 years.
It's the top one. It's the top one on your
This
cheat
one right
sheet.
here.
It's been 7 years. I've never made a motion to go into executive session.
So,
I don't plan to start tonight.
All right. I move that we go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter about firing a commissioner. No. Personnel matter pursuant to KRS 618101F.
we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. We are in executive
You
session.
didn't say anything. Right?
We move back into regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
There's an echo in here. Thank you, Commissioner Terry and Commissioner Cottle. We're in regular session. Is there any further business to come before this commission?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Michelle was good at that.